So my avatar body here doesn't have a flesh piece to it. There isn't a human arm attached to part of it in that kind of sense. Instead, it's a different body that can be that's in a different place. And what is interesting about avatars in this sense is that they are in different places. Now, the movie Avatar makes this very confusing, so that's not quite the same thing. But in this sense of avatars as they exist, in the real world, this is a very interesting difference to me about trying to think about what is it new that avatars and this kind of embodiment bring to the table. These possibilities for changeability. I could change my body very quickly. It's much harder to do in the physical world. I could have more than one avatar body. I could have an anonymous body that's much easier to do online than in the physical world. And you'll notice when I'm talking, as in my book, I'm always very careful to talk about the physical world or the actual world, but not the real world, because the virtual is real and we don't want to sort of imagine a real world that has no technology in it. And Berrigan, that's a good point about the avatar. Part of this issue too is the difference in what an anthropologist would call an emic or edic term. So an emic is a sort of insider term and sort of how the people understand things. An edic term is an outsider analytic term. And one thing that can be confusing is that we have sort of double duty terms out there. So avatar, you can have a kind of technical definition that like I and other people try and use, but then it can also have an everyday definition that can sort of slop all over the place, and people can use it to refer to a Facebook icon, or I think someone exactly said that's more of an icon than an avatar. And there's nothing wrong with emic terms. It's not that they are bad. They're often very useful. In fact, that's what we try as anthropologists to learn about. It's just the key issue is to avoid confusing the sort of emic with the edic and sort of the insider or sort of the categories that people are using in everyday life versus a sort of the more conceptual terms that we might be using. And so I think, this is like when I'm talking to outside audiences, as I did for this talk, I sort of talked about how, here's some different avatar bodies I could have. I could change my body right now, but you all are familiar enough with that, and I don't want to risk crashing the client. But actually, let me just skip to the end of these slides and just make a sort of final point, and then we can talk more. Let me see if I can find my final slide here. Oops, don't need that. Don't need that. Yes, here we are. This will be my last slide, and then we can start to deal with some of these questions. So here's my final point I'll make, and then we can talk for a bit. So if you use your camera abilities, your mouse abilities, to zoom up on the left of these two images, you will see the original McDonald's page from 1996. And McDonald's probably spent $3 million or whatever on this very advanced web page, because back then this was bleeding edge technology, right? It was red. No, I think it has, if you look at the original version on the Internet Archive, I think it has like one little moving GIF on it. But this was like really hardcore. Right? This is very advanced at the time. On the right hand, you see an example of a Twitter feed, and this could be also a Facebook page or a Twitter feed from last week. Just think about a Twitter feed that you might look at today if you go onto Twitter at this very moment. Now, Twitter is a very simple technology. Facebook is too, but Twitter is a great example because it is so simple, right? It's just 140 characters, maybe a couple of other little links or other kinds of things. In fact, it's so simple